spanning the entire globe, involving hundreds of different cultures, explaining the same phenomenon by different names.
The nature of the footprints, namely their remarkable consistency, their biomechanical appropriateness, those aspects that are extremely compelling.
Hey guys, welcome to the Bigfoot Influencers. My name is Tim Halloran. I'm solo tonight. Dana's not going to be joining us, so I'm sorry. We had a crazy week. We were traveling last week. Spent some time in Missouri. Got out in the woods a little bit and just trying to catch up. So I'm super excited that we've got an amazing guest. I heard our guest on Jeremiah Byron's podcast originally, Bigfoot Society. And Jeremiah was nice enough to connect me with our guest tonight, Rob. And then just super excited to have him. Rob's got some fascinating experiences, and I'm just going to set you guys up now. We're probably not going to get to all of them because I think I could have Rob on for 2 or 3 hours or sit around a campfire. Hey, Rob, how you doing?
Dave? Doing well,
I'm
sir.
wonderful. Yeah. Again, I apologize.
I'm sorry to be here.
Yeah. Jeremiah was just kind enough. I heard I heard you on his podcast, and I was just blown away. And I just compelling your background, what you've experienced out there, and just super excited to have you here. And you're not too far away from us, so maybe we'll get up there and get out in the woods and do a podcast. So that would be kind of fun.
We'll just take you in the backyard here.
Yeah, that's what I mean. You're only a few hours away. We could definitely do that.
Yeah.
What's your background? Can you just share a few sentences about that with the audience?
Honestly, I grew up in Oklahoma, eastern Oklahoma, just mountains and lakes and streams. Growing up in Oklahoma, when I first got there, I was originally from California. So growing up as a kid, the subject of Sasquatch is definitely piqued my interest at a young age, with the Patterson Gimlin film, being shown on television, picking up books and things of that nature as a kid and reading up on the subject. It was always in the back of my mind. When I got to Oklahoma, all of that stuff kind of became reality in a sense. Where I'm from there in eastern Oklahoma, this subject is, everybody knows. You could literally walk up to random people and be like, "Do you believe in Sasquatch?" And they'd be like, "Yeah." And the reason for that is most of us spend a lot of time in the woods, and we understand that if it leaves prints, it's alive and it breathes. Nobody's out there in the middle of nowhere, trying to hoax people, especially in the backwoods Oklahoma. It's just not happening. Where I grew up, the Queen Wilhelmina mountain range runs into the Ouachitas. That would be looking just directly back. I'm I grew up right on the border of Arkansas there. The Ouachitas run right out of there into the Kiamishis. The Winding Stair mountain range is also right from. We were always in the woods, either hunting or fishing or just going back roading and four-wheeling and, doing camping out, Later on in life, I got into climbing in the 90s, and I've pretty much been doing that ever since. So I get outside an awful lot. I spend most of my time outside. If I'm not at work, I'm in the woods, whether it be hiking or climbing or just to be out in nature. I spend as much time out there as I possibly can. I always have. But when I got to Oklahoma, my great uncle, he told me a story, and it kind of freaked me out a little bit. But I thought he might be fibbing a little bit, and then he actually took me out there. So I can start off with that one. So my uncle told me that they'd bought some property out past Hodge in Oklahoma. You're probably not gonna. You may find that on a map. And they bought some property out there on just outside of it's in the Blue Mountain Range there, which is basically the Ouachitas. And they got their cabin built, and they went out the first night, him and his wife, and they never went back. 4 individuals decided that they didn't really like that cabin, and they started throwing rocks at the cabin, and some of them were large enough to go through the roof. You know, I kind of wanted to call BS on it, and then he, you know, put me in the truck and took me out to the cabin that had been there for years. And
Right.
Those stones were still sitting inside the cabin. The holes are still there, and the cabin's still there. It's fallen down on itself, but it must have happened. So I definitely believed him after that. I mean, proof's in the pudding. And then years later, I guess it'd be a few years later, me and a buddy, my best friend, still to this day, we decided we were going to go out and see if we could, you know, kill a couple hogs. And we decided to go out towards the Queen Wilhelmina Mountain Range, out to a place called Deer, Oklahoma. Deer is basically a 4-way stop. That other than that, it's just in the mountains. It's literally a truck. Like you can pull an 18-wheeler off on the side of the road there. That's Deer. And we started to go back towards the Arkansas border there, the state line, and we decided to go up the mountain there. We went up an old logging road, and we were on this thing for miles, just, you know, looking out the window to see if we could, you know, spot tracks. See tracks, get out of the truck, go that way, follow the tracks. And we were coming up the mountain on kind of a steeper area, and we were coming around a pretty sharp curve. And as it flattened out, my buddy slammed on the brakes, and I know exactly why I did it, because I was looking at the same thing out my window that he was looking out his window. Now, mind you, this is an old 90s, you know, crew cab Ford. It's not a small truck. And what I was looking at was a very large human footprint, basically. He was looking at the same thing. We both looked at each other and went, oh, wow. We used some other wording, trying to keep it clean. They may not say it that way. But anyway, it must have just crossed because there was water seeping out of the print itself. And it took once in that one stride. We obviously scared the individual, and it was definitely a running stride. I would say, and in that stride, it was literally as wide as the truck. It went from the one door to the other side of the truck, because I had a full print on my side, and he had a print that was just kind of into where the little bit of a runoff was on the side of the road there. The print was right there. Next print on the other side of the door where I was in the passenger seat. And then the next print was literally a couple feet off the ground up the bank.
Okay.
You could just see it. So it obviously crossed in front of us, like I said, of the track itself. We used some colorful words, grabbed the rifles, and jumped out of the truck.
Can you describe the print?
And yeah, Ryan at the time, he's about 6'4", 6'5", 360 pounds of man. He wears a size 30 in his foot. It was I'd say about 7 inches across the front, and maybe a 5-inch heel. It was pretty fat. It was pretty big, and not only that, it was really in the mud. Now, it had rained 2 days prior to that, so it was still kind of cloudy and drizzly the day before that. And maybe in the mountain, it might have got a little bit of extra rain, but it was still wet out. So we jumped out of the truck and headed out towards the prints, and you could definitely follow the trackway into the woods. We got in 60 or 70 yards, and we decided that this was just a bad idea. We could smell him or it, and it smelled like death. You'll never forget that smell once you've smelled it. So, you know, the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. The wow factor was definitely there. We're like, wow, this is really happening. Like, this is awesome. And at the same time, you're like, let's go. I want to get out of here now. Right. So we jumped in the truck. We drove up the road a little ways, turned around, and we headed down the mountain. Hog hunting trip over. Back to the house. We talked about it a little bit down the road, and then we just got quiet and just sat there thinking about what happened. I'm sure that's what was going through Brian's mind as well as mine. That was the first instance that I actually seen physical evidence of a Sasquatch. I was 16, maybe somewhere around that age. That's the first time I actually seen sign. And like I said, if it leaves a track, it's breathing, especially out in the middle of nowhere. I guess Heavener's probably 50 miles at least from that spot, and there's nothing else there except for Zoe, Oklahoma, which is, I think, 8 people live there. They don't even have a post office. I'm pretty sure it's just 8 people that live in a place called Zoe. Wasn't Class A. It was just footprints, but let me tell you, those footprints were very fresh. Like I said, the water was running out of them. It literally crossed in front of us. We just missed them. Even with a rifle in hand, and even with my 360-pound buddy, we were still pretty frightened and taken aback by the situation. So we jumped in the truck off to the house. Years later, I believe it was 2002, me and a climbing partner, we'd been climbing partners for a few years, and we decided that we were going to go ahead and quit our jobs and go to work for the Boy Scouts of America. And I was living in Fayetteville, Arkansas at the time. We had to go to the BSA camp and do some training and whatnot in order to do what we were going to do. I was going to be the trekking director for a high adventure camp. He was going to be the climbing director. I would be the assistant climbing director for the Boy Scouts of America. The camp is located on the Buffalo River, in the Buffalo River region there in Arkansas, just outside of Jasper, Arkansas. It's literally in Jasper, basically. It's the only town there, really. And in preparation for this, we left camp. Camp was actually in South Texas. We drove back up. It was probably last weekend of April 2002. We're pretty athletic dudes still to this day. I do a lot. But we decided to really get on these trails and make sure that we could, do the task at hand. As a trekking director, the Boy Scouts were after their 50-miler patches, whether 50 miles on the river or 50 miles on trail. So that was my job. And I wanted to make sure that I could do that job as efficiently as possible. And not only that, I wanted to make sure that I mentally took notes of interesting spots within the trail and things of that nature. So we decided to go for a run one morning. It was a long run. It was around 12 miles, 6 miles out, 6 miles back. The trail there is called the BRT, the Buffalo River Trail. There's an upper trail and a lower trail. The lower trail runs right next to the Buffalo River. We decided to take the high road and then come back on the low road. We took the high road because it was early in the morning. It hadn't started to warm up yet. Like I said, it's the last week of April coming into May. So the weather was pleasant, sunny, beautiful day. We took off, and on our way back, we stopped maybe a quarter of a mile past a place called Horseshoe Bend. Every river's got a horseshoe bend, and we decided that we're going to take a dip. The Buffalo River is lined with limestone cliffs that go up to almost 300 feet. And we salivate as rock climbers. We salivate over these things because they're beautiful. They look like somebody painted it with a paintbrush. So we went in the water. I came out of the water, and I'm looking at the bluff in front of me. There's this beautiful line with a crack in it, and I'm thinking we could definitely climb this thing. And my vantage point was such that I could actually see a little ways past the top of the cliff there. And I was following the line up, and Carl was still soaking in the water for a second, and I noticed that there was somebody standing there watching us. So I called Carl out of the river. I used some colorful words. I said, "Carl, get your ass out of the water. You need to come see this." Now, Carl is, we call him Crazy Carl for a reason, but he's a very serious individual. He's kind of a skeptical when it comes to anything that he can't see or touch. Honestly, I don't think the subject of Sasquatch, I don't think we ever even brought it up until this day. I told him, come out. I said, "Carl, get your ass out of the water." I said, "Come here and sit down and take a look at what I'm looking at." He goes, "You looking at that route?" And I'm like, "Not anymore." And he goes, "What's up?" And he sits down. I said, "Now follow that line up. And what do you see about 40 yards past that top of that bluff?" He said, "Is it that?" I was like, "That is a very large human." At that moment, there's 2 cedar trees. He's standing in between the cedar trees.
Okay.
Now, I don't want to give you. It was a very large individual.
Okay.
If I were to guess, that individual at least 8 feet tall, and not only that, he was as wide as a 2-door refrigerator, no problem. And as we're looking at him, he's standing very, very still. You can see his You can see him plain as day. You can't make out any features. He's a little too far up, but he's standing between two cedar trees, and then he starts to sway back and forth. Now, there is no wind, by the way. Wasn't windy, and those cedar trees are not moving. And he's standing up taller than the cedar trees were. Carl's kind of tripping out a little bit. He's like, man, what the? And I'm like, I know. And so we sit there, and we're watching him watch us for a minute. And like I said, he starts to sway back and forth, kind of ape-like in a sense, like it was kind of exciting for it.
Oh,
that's how I felt. You know what I mean? Like he was like, he kind of just started to do this thing. And then he just crouched down, hands in between both legs. He just squatted down. Now, he got himself small like that. I think he realized we were looking at him. And when he squatted down, we continued to watch. This went on for a couple of minutes.
Oh,
in that situation, time, you're not really thinking about it. But in hindsight, this was going on for a few minutes. He didn't just up and leave. Carl actually got up and jumped back in the water for a second, jumped back out, and I was like, we should probably get out of here. He's like, grab the backpacks. And so we turned around, grabbed the backpacks, and as we turned around to look, he was gone. So we knew we weren't just seeing things.
Right.
Because those two cedar trees are there, and the individual in the middle was gone. But I had two within a week. Now, he is on the opposite side of the river that the BRT is on. Camp gets started the following week.
Okay.
I had a troop come out of Louisiana, and we were getting ready for a 50-miler. I got everybody situated, packed up. I had some food drops made at certain points along the river, so we didn't have to carry so much. And I explained to the scoutmasters that the terrain was difficult and that I might get ahead of them. And if I do get ahead of them, don't worry about it. I'll be waiting when you top the hill. I'm a fast hiker. Keep an eye on the kids. Keep them on the trail. Yada yada yada.
Okay.
So we have to hike into Kyle's Landing, and then out of Kyle's Landing, the BRT goes up, or you can take the BRT low road. I decided to take them the high road so they can actually see the vistas and the views from up top of the Buffalo River. It's a really good hike through there. And we got I'd say about an hour. We were going up the trail there out of Kyle's Landing. And I just want to quickly explain that there are elk in this area. It's the only place in Arkansas where there is elk. I did get ahead of them. I was a good 60, 80 yards up the trail. I kind of hear the kids, but I like getting ahead and just keeping my own pace and stopping when everything flattens out and waiting for everybody to come up. It gives the scouts time to, interact with their scout leaders or their dads. So mostly their dads, scout leaders. And I hear a limb or a tree break, really is what it sounded like. It sounded like a tree just snapped. It was loud enough that I took off running towards it. That's when this happened. So not only did I hear a limb snap, you could also hear a large thud. So I took off towards it. In my mind, I'm thinking elk. Why? Just noise. I just went towards the noise. I wanted to see if I could get up there, maybe whistle at them and keep them held so the kids could come up and maybe see the elk.
Right.
Those split-second thoughts. I ran up the trail, I don't know, 40, 50 yards. As I came over the top, the branch itself was sitting in the trail. I'd obviously woke him up, and it was in the tree. And I guess when he came out of the tree, and it was definitely we'll get to that part in a second. When he came out of the tree, he came out with a vengeance, and I guess he grabbed that limb, and the limb and snapped. I happened to look left because I caught movement. So as soon as I did look left, there he was. He was between 30, 35 yards for me. My yardage is pretty good. I'm pretty good with deer hunting. I can judge yardage pretty well. He was about 30, 35 yards. He was standing behind a very large oak tree. He was holding it in a manner where his arm came all the way around the front of it. So I had a full vision of it, of not only that half of his body, as well as the large hand that's holding onto the tree. And it was a tree peak, if that's what you want to call it. He was kind of trying to get small. He wasn't exactly erect. He was kind of sitting down a little bit. And as I started to look at him, of course, I'm taking all of this information in as fast as I can, because there's no telling how long this individual is going to be standing there. But I hear the kids coming up, and so did he. And that's when he stood up. You could hear the kids running up. And when he stood up, he stepped out just enough that I could catch almost 3/4 of his body, easily as wide as a double wide refrigerator. The best way to explain this hulking individual was a left tackle. An NFL left tackle in full pads was not quite as big as this individual. His arms were as they were way bigger than my legs. And his biceps were ridiculous. They were enormous. His delts on the side of his were at least this wide. They just came down like this. No neck. The individual was a very, very dark brown. You could actually get a little bit of reddish tone into because of the way the light was filtering through the trees. You could see a little bit of red. His face was very hairy, okay, except for the cheekbones here. Same as my beard, except for it would come up and it was just across here. His pecs were actually wide open. The skin was very, very dark. I did not see the bottom of his hand really clearly. The hair that hung off of his arm was, I don't know, 5 or 6 inches hanging. It was very dreadlocky, matted, if you would. As he stood up, that's when you could really just witness the size of the individual. You could, even through all the hair, you can just see the ripped. I mean, he was ripped muscle. I wish I could get that ripped. It was just tons of muscle. I would probably estimate he was 500 pounds or better. He had to be. And it was solid muscle. Not only that, he was very barrel chested. And the reason I know that is because as he stood up from the tree, he let go of the tree. And that's when he it wasn't really a smile. It was kind of he just showed me his teeth in kind of disgust. Like he just did one of those, and he stood up and he turned and he started to walk away. And as he turned, I noticed that there was a bit of gray that came down to a point on his back. You could see his lats. I mean, he was just enormously wide across the back. No neck. Everybody says they have cone-shaped heads. Now, he did have a very pronounced brow, eyes set back, cheekbones out, flat nose. His jaw was very wide. It was almost kind of ridiculous in a sense. It was almost, I don't even know how to explain it. It was very, like, if I had his skull, I could stick it on top of my head and wiggle it around, is how big it looked as far as his jawline was concerned. His hair was very, very long across the top and going down his back. And all of the hair that was coming off of his head from where his neck would be, a lot of it was very matted and almost dreadlocked onto his back. Like I said, he was very, very dark brown, almost black with these red hues in the hair. I don't want to call it fur, because I'm telling you right now, they're not apes. They are very human. I feel like we're fooled by museum pieces of what Neanderthal actually look like. I feel like they toned down a little bit why is this is probably the reason why on it. I feel like they're really a hominid. They're definitely a human of some sort, whether they be Homo erectus, Neanderthal, Division, somewhere in that range. I don't know, but what I can tell you is they're very large, hairy humans. They're humans. Everything about his facial structure screamed human to me. The only difference is size and hair. If you had to go live out in the woods, you'd have to adapt, and your body would do that. And if it's been millennia, you're gonna adapt very well, and those traits are gonna be bred in. Even if it comes down to better vision at night, things of that nature. If you're a wild human, I can understand how that happens over a millennia. Those adaptations happen in every single animal that we know of as species. They have to adapt to their environment, and I believe that's exactly what we're dealing with. We're dealing with humans that are feral. And now, where they are in our family tree, that's a Dr. Meldrum question. I can't answer that one, but I can tell you that from what I saw, I would think they're Neanderthal or somewhere in that general vicinity of human, or even something outside of that. But that's probably as close as I could think, because Neanderthal were quite heavy boned. I mean, all we have is bone record. So they were a little bit sturdier than we are. Now, as far as size and stuff is concerned, I don't know where that comes from. But as far as their look is concerned, they're some type of hominid, for not an ape. I guess we are considered apes, but they're not gorillas. Okay, even gorillas are capable of learning sign language and love and caring and things of that nature. So to describe Sasquatch as a mindless animal, we're doing ourselves an injustice there. I can completely understand why they hide and why they stay in the woods, and that they're the hide and seek champions of the world, because humans are nasty. We have guns. We start fires. We're not very nice. I would stay away from us too if I were them. We're not exactly safe. The safest spot for them is the woods, which is the reason I'm even talking about this, is because people ought to know that they exist. One, two, we have to figure out a way to come up with some type of conservancy or protection, because I can kind of understand why nobody wants to admit it, because if you admit that there's humans living in the woods, those woods have to become off limits, and oil, bye-bye cutting down the trees and clear cutting, bye-bye all of that stuff. So I can understand how money plays a part and how government wants to keep that under wraps as much as they possibly can. But nowadays, I feel like a lot more people understand what they are, one, and now what to look for, which is positive, as long as they don't go hunting for them. As a hunter, even if I had a rifle, I don't know that I could pull the trigger. They're humans. They're humans, period. But I don't know any other way to explain it. I'm actually Native American myself. I have a little bit of Spanish, hence the beard. I'm Apache and Yaqui. So as far as Native tradition is concerned, most tribes in the United States have a name for it.
You're right.
They all have a name for them, especially when it comes to the Northwest, Oregon, Washington, all the way up into Alaska. Most of the tribes up there, they did totem. There's not a totem pole out there that has a fake animal on it. Just not a thing. There's bear and wolf and eagle and Sasquatch right at the top of the totem. And when it comes down to it, you should probably listen to the ones who actually lived out there amongst the trees in the woods with everybody else. That's how we came across medicine. We were listening to natives tell you what worked for what. So and not only that, there's no reason to lie. But, in order to keep things controlled, I understand why government would not want it.
Possible.
lot of money out there. You're gonna miss out on it if you start to protect something. That you might frighten some individuals from going out into the woods. I actually know individuals that have been frightened from going back out into the woods, and they even own the property and they don't even want to go back out there because they've come across these individuals. So anyway, as far as Arkansas was concerned, those were the two happenstances that I had. It really opened my eyes up to what's going on. It was a blessing, really. It's one thing to talk about it. It's one thing to see footprints. It's another thing to understand and see one. I've already told you I've been in the woods a lot. I lived in Dallas for 10 years, and the closest rock climbing areas to us are either Austin or Arkansas, as far as developed, and in Oklahoma, as far as developed areas are concerned. But just across the Red River there, growing up there, I know that there's a lot of abundance of sandstone. So some of my friends and I was like, hey, listen, we need to start Google mapping some areas over here by Atoka in the McGee Creek area up towards Sardis Lake. And we ended up finding some areas out there. We did our due diligence and we got permission to go out and start developing this area on I guess that'd be Highway 43 outside of Daisy, which is just the opposite side of McGee Creek. The McGee Creek entrance that we usually went into was off of Highway 3 out of Atoka. We went out and we drove down this road. It's off of Highway 3. I don't know, 8, 10, 12 miles. It's a ways. It is paved, but not really. And it goes out into the park. There is a left turn that can take you down to a boat ramp. And then it just comes in. There's some primitive camping areas. There is a ranger station or house. The ranger stays there. And if you keep driving a couple miles, you get to the end of the road. It's just a cul-de-sac down there. We got out of the car and the trail was directly in front of us. It went down and to the right into the valley. The lake was straight in front of us. As we started to go down right, we were trying to make a decision on whether to turn back because we had seen a little bluff line right underneath us as we were going down the trail. We went down the trail just a few minutes and we hear a whoop. It was very apparent whoop. And it was just up the hill, just more towards the center of us looking. And then the third whoop came from basically behind us where the gully goes back towards the ranger station. Now, my buddy who's with me, he was from Baltimore. This is basically his first time in the woods. And, he asked me, he said, what was that? And I said, I can tell you what it isn't. I said, it's not a bear, it's not a raccoon, and it's not a deer, it's not a hog, none of that. So they were just standing there kind of puzzled, and I was kind of excited inside because it's been a while. This is 2010, so it's been about 8 years since I witnessed anything. And then we get another whoop off in the distance. And then a few minutes later, the tree came down. And I mean, the whole tree came down. So they pushed down a tree and we decided we probably ought to leave. So we did. I was probably the one that brought that up. I was like, hey, I think it's about time we go now.
Right.
But now I know what's going on out there. So we all kind of bouldered around on some stuff for a little while. We heard the tree come down. We got up, out we went. Then I talked my friend, my setter, guy who sets most of the routes in the gym. I talked him into going back out there to see if we could find some other boulders going down and left. We had to close the gym down that night, and we decided to go out late. It was cold. It was March, maybe probably last weekend of March. It started to warm up a little bit. Prior to that, February there was ice storms and stuff. December, January, February, in that area at that year, a lot of trees came down. It looked like a bomb went off out there. There was just treetops everywhere. We got into Atoka before the liquor store closed because we did stop and grab a little half-year 30s that night. And we prepped for it because the next day was supposed to be sunny and be in the 50s. Sandstone is really starts to, it feels a really good kind of tightens up, if you would. And the friction on it is really good in your hands, especially for your climbing shoes. So climbing in the 50s on sandstone is kind of so that's what we were hoping for. So we stopped at Atoka. We grabbed a half pint of SoCo, and we headed back out. Now we camped on the left-hand side of the road there in a little primitive area, just before, literally, you could walk across the street, 50 yards, and the ranger station is right there, the house. There's a 4-wire barbed wire fence across the road. That at that time, the road was basically dirt. It's been fixed since then. As he was setting up camp, I said, hey, listen, I'm going to go across the road over here. I see a bunch of wood over there. I'm going to bring. So I go across the road, and there's a tree with a Y in it. So I start picking up limbs and snap them off between the Y, and I'm throwing them, making lots of wood noise, snapping off trees, throwing them over the fence as I snap them off. And thinking back as this happened, I believe that was what brought the individual. So we make our campfire. We drink a little bit of SoCo. We do not finish the bottle, by the way. We were not drunk. We were definitely warm inside, though, because it was cold. We decided we're going to climb into bed. So we climbed in the tent, tried to go to sleep. We knew that we had two of our girlfriends coming in the morning. There is no cell phone service out there. You're in the middle of nowhere. So I wasn't even expecting a phone call. My friend, we'll just keep him nameless. He wakes me up in the middle of the night. Rob, wake up. Somebody's in our campsite. And I have a little one of those little blue and white igloo coolers, the little flip top ones. You push the button and flip it over. I hear something messing with it. And he said, somebody's in our campsite. Now we're in the middle of absolutely nowhere, Oklahoma. We didn't hear a car come. So, those thoughts are kind of going through my head, but now I hear somebody in the campsite. So I had my CRKT knife with me, and it's not a small one. I grabbed a hold of it. Kenzie was already unzipping the tent. Kenzie said, it just ducked down behind the car, or he just ducked down behind the car is what he said. So he unzipped the tent. We both come barreling out of there. And when we did, it stood up and took off. And when it stood up, we immediately stopped. We weren't moving a muscle. He went full on white. I probably did too, because when it took off, it was running down a fence line. So the car was parked at another barbed wire fence here, which actually is where people will pull their horse trailers into that little vicinity there, get their horses out and take them out on the trail. It ran down the fence line back towards the lake. And it's the only way to describe it is like a herd of elk busting through the brush. I mean, you could just hear it, whop, 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 and just everything is breaking as he goes. And then you hear the fence pop, and then whop, 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 and you could hear this thing running off for 100 yards, just breaking everything in its path, just running full out. Needless to say, we didn't get much sleep that night. We did end up falling asleep by happenstance. My phone rings. Like I said, there's usually no service out there. And as my phone is ringing, the girls come driving by. So I pick up the phone. I'm like, hey, you just passed us. Turn around. Come back. We'll meet you at the road. As they're turning around, I look at Kenzie and I'm like, we don't say nothing, man. He's like, I'm not saying a damn thing. I'm like, they won't want to come out here ever again. He goes, I don't know that I want to come out here ever again. I was like, it's gonna be a day. Right. I was like, it's gonna be a great day. Calm down. Well, as that's happening, girls are going down and they're turning around and coming back to our little campsite, and a gentleman comes pulling in with a horse trailer. He pulls into that spot just behind our campsite there. I love you too, buddy. The girls come in and we're chit-chatting and we're getting gear out, basically bouldering pads that are basically backpacks to get everything ready to go. We're going to throw it in the car and head out. And the guy's trying to get his horses out of the trailer, and they don't want to come out. They come out and run back in. They come out, whinny, stand up, whinny, right back in the trailer. So me and Kenzie walk over to the fence line, and we're like, hey, everything okay? Do you need any help? He was like, I have no idea what's wrong with my damn horses. They do not want to ride today, so I guess we're going home. And me and Kenzie kind of looked at each other. We're like, I bet we know
Mm-hmm.
why. They know. They could smell it. I'm sure they could. We could not. I didn't smell anything at this in the morning. I did not. I didn't smell anything that night either. So since we were standing at the fence line there at that 4-wire barbed wire fence, I noticed down in the left there where I thought I heard the fence pop, the fence is broken. I was like, Kenzie, I'll be right back. And I start looking at the ground. The terrain there is very rocky. Okay. Finding footprints, unless you're on an absolute beautiful on the trail itself, finding footprints in the woods there, it's not happening. It's just rock everywhere. Rocks, woods, leaves. Finding a footprint there is needle in a haystack. But you can always see somebody where tracks went through leaves. And then my gaze kind of went up because all of the branches between 8 and 9 feet, maybe even a little taller, between 8 and 9 feet, we'll just call it that. They're broken. You can see it as you're looking down the fence line. You can see where everything was broken. And I keep doing this because if you're running through the woods at night, this is the best way to keep stuff out of your face. So I can imagine that's what was happening. So I walked down. I could see a trackway going that way, except for there's no imprints. Just you could see where all the leaves were puffed up. So I walked down to the fence, and sure enough, what I didn't think about was there any hair on there? I did not think about that. But you could see where it had hit the fence, and you could see a spot where the leaves, like he pitted or spun there, and then headed back down, and which is exactly what I heard at that night, which brought me back to the campsite. We get the girls up, we go. I left everything in the camp. We left everything in the campsite exactly the way it was. Days over, girls come back. They're like, hey, we're going to head back to Dallas. We're like, we're going to pack up camp, whatever. So me and Kenzie get there and we sit down, and all day we're thinking about this. I know he was thinking about it.
I bet. Yeah.
Like, so I saw a big. Yes, you did, sir. That's exactly what we saw. Now it's nighttime, and there it is, 8 foot tall human behind our car. But that's when I looked at the igloo, and I was like, okay. So if I was a raccoon, I would be batting at it, trying to get to it. So I batted at it a little bit, and I was like, that wasn't what I heard. And I knocked it around. I said, nope, that wasn't what I heard. And I had Nalgene bottles full of water inside there. So I picked it up, and I went like this. And it's exactly what I heard. And you have to have a phone to do that one. Because all I heard was the chunk. So it picked up my igloo and was looking at it. Because the exact sound came from when I picked it up and looked at it. Because my Nalgene bottles were inside. They were not full of water. They were already empty, but you could ka-chunk, ka-chunk. You could hear them. And I was like, you picked up my igloo, man. And Kenzie was like, that's exactly what happened. That's exactly what happened. I was like, crazy. I just put it down. I was like, I'm getting chills thinking about it. It was thrilling. So that's McGee Creek. Now, McGee Creek, if you look on the map, McGee Creek, I literally went and spent a week out there by myself. I lived on fish. I wanted to see if I could go out there. That was 4 days, not a week, 4 days. I went out there for 4 days, and I slept in the woods in a hammock, and I took a knife and a lighter, and that was pretty much it. I wanted to see how easy it would be to survive out there for a couple of days. And I didn't have anything else to do, so I rock climbed and bouldered, and I went down and I went fishing. I took some string and hooks and whatnot, and I went fishing. And when I couldn't catch fish, I'd just jump in the water and noodle, because in Oklahoma, we do that. We just jump in the water and fill up underneath stuff, and you pull the fish out, mostly catfish. The wildlife out there is just plentiful. There's deer and hog and turkey, and the lake is massive. There's tributaries coming in all over. You can stay hidden there for eternity, and nobody'd ever know you're there. So yeah, that's Oklahoma.
That's a lot, Rob. That's a lot. So we unfortunately we got to wind down here.
Thank you for letting me talk to you and tell you what I know and how I feel. Appreciate it.
I appreciate you. This was amazing. Thank you so much.
You bet. Hey, it's my pleasure.
Okay.
Honestly, I just want to, any way I can help out to bring awareness to what we're dealing with. I'm more than happy to talk to you about it.
It's important. Yeah, I know people need to hear it. So
very important.
I thank you again.
Sounds good, bud. You have a good one. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye. Wow. So thanks, folks, for hanging in with us on that. We were having a little bit of audio issues. I think I was a little delayed, so you're probably going to like it because you didn't hear me talk a lot. And we had a guest talking more than me, so that's great. Thank you all again for joining us. We appreciate each and every one of you. Head on over to the bigfootinfluencers.com. You can check out all of our episodes, all the other things we're doing over there. Go to the Untold Radio Network on YouTube and podcast platforms. Like and subscribe. Send us some love. We appreciate you guys again. Take care.